Hi, my name's Mark. I'm one of the pastors here at Trillium. I'm part of the Funga Drummers, a West African drumming group. And I'm taking lessons with one of the leaders of the Funga Drummers because I want to become a better drummer. I think I'm pretty decent, but I could be a lot better still. And my teacher has me working with a metronome, you know, those things that tick back along, keep you in time with things. And I got to really listen carefully as I'm drumming slowly to make sure I'm right in alignment with the ticks. This allows me to get into what's called the pocket and play in such a way that it brings about a new musical experience. And it got me thinking many years ago, 25 years ago, when I was at the University of Toronto studying music. And I was a keyboard player. And on a Friday afternoon, I saw these notices that hadn't been around all week about a master class with Pinchas Zukerman, who was one of the greatest violinists of the age. He was probably one of the 2 or 3 greatest violinists. He's still a great violinist. But then he was about 40 years old and at the top of his form. And I went to the master class, and students would go up and they'd play a little bit, and then Zukerman would work with them. And in between working with students, he'd ask, you know, if we had any questions for him. And I raised my hand and I asked him this. I said, was there ever a time when you wondered as a student whether you'd play as well as your teacher? And he laughed and he said, I still wonder if I'll ever play as well as my teacher. And we all laughed with him. And then he went on, he said, listen, you got to listen. And he talked about the story about meeting Pablo Casals as a young man. Casals was this great cellist. And Casals invited Zukerman up to his hotel room, and he pulled out his cello. Casals pulled out his cello, and he just went back and forth on this C like for 5 minutes. Back and forth, you know, just loving the sound. And then he played a C sharp and then a D, and it just kept going on. And Zukerman said by the time he got to an F sharp, he thought Casals was going to explode. And then he went back and talked about listening. And I got to tell you, at the end of that answer to my question, I was disappointed because I wanted him to tell me a story about when he was a young man at Juilliard, coming home on the subway, looking out at the Hudson River and just wanting to throw his violin into the Hudson River, but persevering and him convincing me and the other students there who also wondered about our playing whether we should just keep going forward and struggling to make ourselves ultimately a really good player. And he didn't do that. He just kept talking about listening. And I didn't get it. I'm ruminating over this for a couple of days, and then it occurred to me that he was actually telling me how to play as well as my teacher. To listen really, really carefully, to listen deeply and powerfully to what I'm doing with my music. And it occurs to me that those of us who follow Jesus, we should be watching and listening to Jesus in the stories very carefully. You know, so often the stories, we tend to take the point of view of the person who's receiving the blessing or the healing from Jesus. So we looked at the story of Bartimaeus, who was blind, and he cries out for healing from Jesus, and Jesus eventually heals Bartimaeus of his blindness. And of course, we're all blind too, so we need to be healed by Jesus of our blindness, and we need to cry out to the Lord for healing. Very rarely are we ever encouraged to look at the story from the point of view of Jesus, who's the hands of God in the world. Even though Jesus calls us as his disciples to journey with him and also to become the hands of God, and that the same power that moved through the Lord to heal life is meant to move through us. And those stories in the Gospels, those Jesus stories, maybe they're actually important for us to look at from the point of view of Jesus, because they're teaching moments for us about how we're supposed to live in the world, to be his ambassadors, to be ambassadors of the kingdom of love, and to bring about healing and reconciliation and deep forgiveness in life. We're meant to be the miracle makers of life alongside the Lord. In fact, Jesus promises us that when we follow him, the same power that was in him will come to us, and we will do miracles like he did. In fact, greater miracles will be done through us because our numbers have been multiplied. The Christ who is one, when it becomes many, can do so many greater things. And that's what Jesus is about for us. At Trillium, we're trying to struggle about how we who are caught up in that rationally reserved, logical way of seeing life can do the stuff of Jesus and bring about the kingdom of peace, love, and joy. You, me. We're meant to be virtuosos of love. We're meant to give expressions to love in this life that brings about miracle making. You're a miracle maker, and so am I.